right. Well, that's what we're here for, is to help you avoid the craziness. Um, I'm Lori Coleman. I am a co-founder of DemCast and director of strategy. And with me tonight is somebody that you guys already know. That's Jamie Carter, who is director of partnerships at DemCast. We're going to tag team this presentation. We encourage you to write your questions into chat, but we will be stopping frequently to answer questions because we know this is a very interesting subject and a very difficult subject. So we want to be able to answer your questions as we go as well. So we're living in a time where anyone, anywhere can broadcast to millions of people. And every day we feel what it feels like to live in a post-truth world. Russian disinformation, I think, caught us off guard in 2016. But these days, disinformation is much more homegrown. And now it's just openly used as a political campaign tool. So what can we do as concerned citizens to secure and protect the election in Virginia from attacks that travel through virtual borders? So the first thing we can do is become informed on how disinformation works, especially as it applies to social media platforms. So we're going to do a deep dive on how this happens. And so let's go to the next slide here. Come on. So we're going to look at what disinformation is and what does weaponized information look like, how disinformation flourishes on today's social media platforms, how you can fight back about it, and how you can be part of disinformation fighters for this election. Jamie?
So first we need to define what we're talking about. So misinformation is false information that is spread regardless of intent to mislead. I think this is something that probably we've all been guilty of. You see something that you want to believe is true, and so you share it without finding out if it's really true. On the other hand, disinformation is false information that is intended to deceive the public opinion, especially propaganda issued by government organization to a rival power or the media. These can contain content ranging from biased half-truths to conspiracy theories to outright lies. But the overarching intent is to manipulate people and blur the truth. Joan Donovan from Harvard University states, disinformation has become an industry, which means the financial incentive and the political gains are now aligned. So if you're wondering why the media declines to call out disinformation as lies or falsehood, it's because the difference between misinformation and disinformation is all about the intent of the person spreading it. And that is something that is very hard to prove. Disinformation is spread by ordinary people acting too quickly, sometimes endemic to the nature of social media. Grassroots-driven narratives started with individuals identifying real-world or one-off incidents, posting them to social media. Then influencers and hyper-partisan media leveraged the grassroots content, assembling it into an overarching narrative and disseminating it across all platforms to their large audiences. And then media picks up these stories after they had reached a critical mass. So propaganda spreads in a top-down direction, which claims first made by prominent political operatives and influencers, often through mass media, which are then discussed and shared by people across social media properties. Disinformation can be spread through real quotes, photos, but they're presented out of context. The more the disinformation plays to outright leaning, bite-sized fears or biases, the more likely we are to react to it. So how does disinformation spread on social media? First, you have to understand algorithms, which is really artificial. Algorithms determines what shows in your feeds, what's trending, what a lot of people are posting about, and it really determines what is shown to fewer people. So algorithms really focus on engagement metrics, how often you engage with an account, topics that you're usually engaging on, the timing of that post. Is it posted during a high traffic area? Are there a bunch of comments as soon as that post is posted? And algorithms also really kind of play off of how often you engage on a platform, and how much engagement the post is getting, likes, comments, retweets, sharing, how many views on a video, link clicks on an article. And when you reply to harmful content or you quote tweet it on Twitter, you're actually helping to push out that original content higher up so that more people see it.
Yes. So where does disinformation come from? Well, it comes from politicians. It comes from clickbait headlines that give the wrong impression. An example of this was just this week when there was an article about Merrick Garland was going to defend Trump against Eric Swalwell's lawsuit. There was nothing in there saying that Merrick Garland was going to do that. That was a theory, an opinion that somebody was floating. Yeah, we also have media like Fox News, OAN, Newsmax that are intentionally spreading incorrect content. We have trolls and bots. So bots are automated accounts that are programmed to spread disinformation. We saw a lot of this in 2016, where we would wake up and overnight, the accounts based in Russia would have been trending something positive about Trump or negative about Hillary. But now trolls are accounts that are run by real people. They could be individuals or foreign actors that are being paid to spread that information. And they are harder to spot than trolls, than bots, because they interact like a real person. We have other countries and governments, and then also people responding to their biases. All right, do we have any questions so far, Jamie?
I don't see any right now.
Okay. All right, so in that case, we're going to do a little activity here called Can You Spot the Troll? And I am going to share.
We do have a question. Are trolls real people?
So in our definition here, trolls, there are real people behind those accounts, but they are misrepresenting who they are and what they're about. So we're going to look at a couple of activities here to see if we can spot the troll. All right, so there's 8 profiles here. Here's profile 1. We've got Chloe Evans here, a student in Atlanta. And she's got a dead horse here. She's got Obama saying that it caused a plant explosion that caused a dead horse, apparently. Some sort of quote. Something you didn't tell me that I'm a model. Now, what do you think? I want you to respond in the chat here. Is this person a real person, or do you think this person's a troll? There seems to be a unanimous troll And let's see if you know. You're right. She is a Russian-made troll. Hundreds of accounts for her, like her, were active, and this is an automated effort, but um, you know, this is how you know that you've got a hoax event here. Profile images of attractive women, and that claim to be models is a fairly common um, uh, presentation there. Okay, let's look here at Harmony Edwards. So this is looks like a Twitter. College girl, conservative, pro-life, pro-2A, and we've got her sharing Pennsylvania voter rolls. The DNC teaching illegals to vote. And here they're going to get full citizenship too. And here we've got retweeting Melania and complaining about Michelle Obama. So what do you guys think? Troll or real? Let's see what the chat says. We got a mix of real. She feels real. Troll. Not real. Let's see. She is a troll. She is a troll attributed to the Russian Network Research Agency. That's the ones that were actually indicted by the State Department, by the Department of Justice. She poses as a young woman who has very strong political opinions and sets herself up in direct opposition. So what are the signs? A lack of personal info. So there's nothing in her profile about family, school, work, friends, pets, nothing. Okay. Connecting to the community. So troll accounts often retweet prominent voices, and they may include positive and uplifting content to sort of gain your trust that they're not a troll. But they are. All right. Let's look at the next person here. This is a Facebook profile of Christopher, lives in Indiana. Here we've got this violent or graphic photo about veterans. Chick-fil-A honoring veterans on Memorial Day. A picture of him riding a tractor with a kid. Pray for the world. Good place to eat lunch. I didn't say the end would be signaled by trumpets. I said trumpets. Panic over coronavirus. What do you guys think? Troll or real person? I see everybody saying yeah. It says Chris is a real person. He's a kind husband and father living in Columbia, Indiana. We can confirm he's real because we know him personally. So he posts about his life. Trolls are going to post about a local, hyper local place to get barbecue.
Yeah, and I know that there was a comment in there earlier that a lot of people here don't post about their personal life. But I think the big difference is even if you don't necessarily post about your personal life, you still tend to share local things that are happening, whether it's stories from your local paper, events and things in your community that are relevant to where you are. And whether you realize that or not, that is an area of interest. And so even if you don't necessarily share on social media, I'm married with 4 kids, there are still those telltale signs of, you post from the Virginia Gazette or you're posting about the Women's Summit.
And here you've got another sign of real accounts is that they have multidimensional views. So Chris does not push out constant messages supporting only extreme views. So some of his political posts are right-leaning. He also pokes fun at President Trump here. So another way to kind of tell this is a real person. All right. Let's see. Power to Women, American feminist. She needed a hero, so that's what she became. This is an Instagram account. Posting about Bernie. We're going to fight to pass overdue equal rights. Posting about women's rights. Feminism. Hypocrisy. Not a single woman was at the White House meeting on women's health. What do you guys think? Troll or real? Got a mix here. I'll admit, this one got me wrong. I said she was real, but she was a troll. These were accounts originating in Russia, and they were part of a network of 50 Instagram accounts. So this account presents itself as a group rather than a person, and that no person or organization is listed as running the group. So that's one of the problems. For or against, so it's talking about extreme polarization. You're either black or white. You're either for this or against it. Okay. Here we've got, I think it's another Instagram. No, it's a Twitter account. Okay, so Amy G, daughter, sister, proud Black American. I get political. Republicans better hope the coronavirus isn't spread from kissing ass. Inspirational quote from Michelle Obama, retweeting. Get this nightmare out of office. Comparing Roger Stone to Crystal Mason. Is I go into jail? Republican logic, which we know that's not logical. All right, what do you think? Troll or real? Got a lot of people thinking she's real, but she's not. She is a troll account. So Amy pretends to be a left-leaning Black woman, a common tactic among trolls. And her strategy is to engage with the Black community, gain followers, and then use that following to manipulate her audience. So you see how it's this is much more undercover than the previous ones that are just flat out in your face. So the signs, mimicking users who are part of a real community. So it's basically digital blackface is what they call this. Fan the flames. Many real users also do this, but disinformation operations have made anger and disgust into, that's their goal, is to make you angry and make you disgusted. All right, we're going to do one more here. Um, I have a question. What do you mean by manipulate her audience? So she's presenting to be a left-leaning Black woman. She's going to develop this whole persona, this character, and get people to follow her. And then she'll have sudden doubts about, you know, now she's hearing things about Hillary that maybe she just can't support. And that now she's worried. Maybe he is the best choice. So they sort of evolve and try to bring people along with them. Okay. So the last profile we'll look at here, I'm not going to pronounce his name because I'm sure that I would mispronounce it. But this gentleman is a scholar, journalist, and activist who is an assistant professor at Rutgers University. If you didn't have anything else but this, what could you do? Anybody have some ideas? How could you think about figuring out? Yeah. That's the first thing that I did was I looked up to see if there's a guy by this name who works at Rutgers. Now, does that mean that's him? No, because somebody could have just got his picture off the website, stuck it on here, and then made the claim. So, but we at least know this person is a real person at some place. All right. So this is somebody talking about, so he's talking about the Philadelphia police budget hearing. He's in Philadelphia. Talking about people who are criminals versus looters versus corporate heroes. And just like that, blue lives don't matter anymore when they're protesting. So here's a little bit of a dig at Joe Biden on here, where he's got Bernie Sanders standing with workers. Talks about doing something in Adobe, and it left it recording. So what do you guys think? Is this guy real or troll? Yeah, he's real. And how do we know that? Because for one thing, he had identifiable information that we could look up. He had a local focus. He's in Philadelphia. He's tweeting about the Philadelphia police budget. Okay, so I think that's enough examples there. Any questions from that before we carry on? Let me switch. All right.
So now we are going to kind of go over how disinformation spreads on social media.
Hey, Jamie.
Yeah.
Before you start, we had a question about what do you do when you discover a troll? And the best thing to do if you find out you're following them or they're following you is to block them on social media. And then you should report them to the social media site. And sometimes you'll have options like they're spreading disinformation, or sometimes you don't have anything but to say maybe they're impersonating someone. So if we look through this guy's thing and it looked like that he could be a troll, but he's pretending to be this person, we could report him as impersonating the professor. What what are the people we see on Facebook, but they're basically blank, few, if any, followers, no personal info, little history of posts. That's either grandma who doesn't know how to do Facebook and she started a profile and she didn't know how to go any further and never went back. Or, it's somebody who only uses it for certain purposes, like Messenger or something like that, where they don't have any intent to like interact with people.
Although I will say on Facebook, especially older people, I came across this a lot last year, where somebody you're a friend with, suddenly you get a friend request from, and they are fake. They're trying to impersonate that person, and those are the ones you really want to report.
Yes. And the people who ask to friend you on Facebook and you have no idea who they are people that are usually trying to sell you something or get you into a scheme. If personally, I don't friend anybody that I don't have multiple friends in common with, unless I've like met this person in person on Facebook. So just ignore them. Stop, drop the request and then report them if they keep asking. So, okay. We'll let Jamie go on to how does this stuff spread on social?
Do we have any other questions before we move on, or?
I was just going to type in the chat. Hi, this is Stair. I was just going to type in the chat that I don't think that having multiple friends is really an indication that the person is somebody that you need to be friends with. I always ask that, those people, and a lot of people go, no, I just said I would be friends with them because we had friends in common, but I no longer use that as my criteria.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't use that as the only criteria.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to go over on how disinformation spreads on social media. Especially during the pandemic, it really magnified the time people spend on social media. The average Facebook user now spends about 15 hours per month on the platform, and overall Americans are spending more than 145 minutes per day engaging on social media. And among TikTok users, that's even higher. So per the Pew Research Center, more than 8 in 10 US adults say they get news from a smartphone, computer, or tablet often or sometimes. And 60% of those people say they do so often. 2/3 of US adults say they get news at least sometimes from news websites or apps, search engines, and about half say they get news from social media, and about 22% from podcasts. But this changes significantly when we break this down by age. Americans 50 and older use both television and digital for news, while the younger age groups have almost fully turned to digital. Americans 18 to 29 stand out. The most common digital way to get news is social media, with 42% saying they got this way often, compared to 17% of those 30 and older. So really, youth is being shaped by what they see on social media. So it's very easy to weaponize fake news. You can do that by satire. I mean, who doesn't love The Onion? But a lot of people will mistake that for real. You've got clickbait. The article that Lori mentioned earlier with Merrick Garland, that was a perfect example of a clickbait headline. It really is kind of more of a fabrication. Then you've got the conspiracy theories, that they're packaged as a legitimate news story. Propaganda, which contains fabrications, and then misleading or out of context information. And the right wing especially are very good at that, of making something fact with only taking a small snippet. So weaponizing social media really facilitates the spread of falsehoods and disinformation about politics, because the algorithms are driving the users to increasingly extreme and polarizing content.
So why is it so easy to believe disinformation? We're going to jump into a little bit of a psychology here. We all have hardwired biases that keep us from being purely rational beings. Propaganda and disinformation exploit fundamental biases and behaviors, preying on your desire for certainty, identity, and belonging. Such content amplifies the fear, anger, or shock that humans feel in uncertain times and taps into the desire to reject ambiguity. Psychologists refer to this as cognitive closure. When it's scary, we want to know what's happening and we want to know what caused, which makes us the ideas that offer clear black and white messaging. So for today, I'm sure you all saw the collapse of the hotel in Miami, and that was scary. And one of the things that we could have easily been spread was that it was bombed, that it was a terrorist attack. I didn't see any chatter about that, which is very interesting, because a lot of times when you see that and it's scary, people are going to assume that a bad actor had something to do with it rather than it just being an accident. Unfortunately, this binary black and white situation puts us into core groups where we facilitate into this polarized my side versus your side politics. And that's certainly, we've seen that happen in American politics, over the past 5 years. We can have a confirmation bias, and that's the tendency to interpret new evidence as confirmation that my belief is real. So if I detest a politician and then I hear something that they supposedly did, I'm like, yeah, that's right, I know he did that, and I might share it without checking first to see if it was real.
Matt Gaetz. Sorry, I had to.
Attribution errors are systematic errors people make when they're trying to evaluate to find reasons for their own behavior or for other people's behaviors. So people make judgments and assumptions about why people behave in certain ways. Well, of course, he had an affair and had his mistress have an abortion, but he's a Republican and that's what they do. But that could have nothing to do with what happened. And then cognitive ease. And this is something I find hard to accept because I'm a very rational, logical thinker. But what we believe is not really based on reality. It's based on what we feel is real. And the feeling can be influenced without you even being aware. And it can be influenced by things that aren't right. So this is why good and bad messaging spreads faster when there's that emotional hook, because we're hardwired to either respond to the feeling positively or negatively. And either way, we could get a reaction out of it.
And we saw Trump use this in 2016, targeting Black and brown voters in Wisconsin.
Yep, exactly. And for me, I will tell you that as a voter in 2015, 26, leading up to the 2016 election, I had this very nebulous feeling that was not positive about Hillary, without having any facts to support that. And when I started dug down into why did I feel that way, I realized I was a victim of propaganda just like everybody else was. And it's hard to question our own beliefs because we have a feeling and we feel that we're right, right? Even if we don't have a reason to do that. Jamie?
So now let's kind of look at the psychological differences between liberals and conservatives, because this is a very real thing. Liberals and conservatives don't just differ politically. They actually are very different psychologically too. Decades of research has shown that people get more conservative when they are threatened and feel afraid. Fear is linked more often to leaning conservative, which we see the Republicans play on constantly. They're going to defund the police and our cities won't be safe. They're going to take away suburbia. There's a caravan of migrants coming across the border to take your jobs. And that is exactly what the Republicans are doing now with critical race theory. But people really embrace political conservatism, at least in part because it serves to reduce their fear, anxiety, and uncertainty. They want to avoid change, disruption, and ambiguity, and to try to explain order and justify inequality among groups and individuals. On the other hand, feeling safe and endowed with strength actually makes you feel more liberal. A 2018 study of college students showed that those with more socially conservative views were quicker to physically look away from disgusting images, pictures of blood, feces, vomit, whatever, than their liberal peers. Some research actually suggests that this is an aversion towards impure pathogens, and it also impacts how people see each other who aren't like them, including social outgroups like immigrants, foreigners, people of a different race. Liberals and conservatives have different approaches to solving problems. When feeling stuck on a problem, liberals are more likely to draw upon a sudden burst of insight, an aha moment, like a light bulb turning on in the brain, while conservatives tend to take a more step-by-step approach. Liberals and conservatives also tend to show compassion to different groups of people. Conservatives will show compassion to small groups of friends and family. Liberals tend to extend that compassion to people and animals around the world. So really the key here is conservatives respond to messages about safety and security. Liberals respond to messages of hope, optimism, and compassion. You can see it with slogans, right? Make America great again, to Obama's, hope and change. That is a stark reminder.
So something, as I was doing this presentation, I decided to dig into the biggest bit of disinformation that we had. And that's really saying something for the past 4 years of complete BS that we went through. And I was thinking about like how to prepare you guys for fighting disinformation in Virginia. And so I thought, what better way than to pick the biggest bit, and the fact that 1 in 3 Americans still believe in the big lie. All right. So 30% of Americans still think Joe Biden lost the election due to massive voter fraud that there is absolutely no evidence of. None. Zero. But the GOP is very good at distilling information into bite-sized messages and then repeating it over and over and over and over. How many times did we see and hear "stop the steal"? Just right until we were so sick of it. And the Dems' response to "stop the steal" was the big lie, I guess. So tell me, what does, you can respond in the chat, what does "stop the steal," what does it mean to you? What does it say to you? do you think? Fairness is being challenged. We need to fight. An action statement. There's been a crime. Yes. So it is, yes, it's strong. We have to act, right? It's an urgent call to action. It rights a wrong.
And again, it plays into the fear that Republicans naturally have.
Yep, I'm being cheated. Someone's taking something from me. We have to fight. I mean, it hits all the emotional triggers that you could hit with 3 words. It's perfect in as far as messaging goes. Okay, so our response was the big lie. And what does that tell people? Nothing. Right. He's the liar. He's lying. He keeps lying. He's lying again. He's lied. It's just, there's no action there. It doesn't tell anybody what they should do. It's not true, but what are we supposed to do about it? Yes, exactly, Corey. So, think about how we should have responded and when should we have responded to this. So just a little, I looked at the social media activity around this. Stop the Steal began being used for the most part 11/1. So before the election, they were already saying it's going to be stolen. We have to stop it. And there were over 500,000 users. It got 24.3 billion impressions in that time frame. Our counter message was, I guess, the big lie. But that really didn't start until 1/6, until the insurrection. And there were various other things tried: protect our vote, save our vote, count every vote. We demand democracy, defend democracy. And Barbara says, defend democracy should have been our response right away. I agree, and we should all have been screaming it at the top of our lungs. So remember what we talked about, that every time you interact with disinformation, it gets pushed up into the algorithm. Just look who retweeted Stop the Steal. Rachel Maddow, Mark Ruffalo, Patton Oswalt, MSNBC, Jake Tapper, and Chris Hayes. All people with hundreds of thousands, if not millions of followers. All people that lean left, but what they did was actually elevate the message, the disinformation. And all of those other messages that the Democrats did got 6.5 billion impressions. So they out-messaged us 3-1, just on Twitter. So
it's really hard to run full analytics on the other platforms. Right. Just because like Facebook and Instagram, it has to be set to public. So.
Right. All right. So the takeaway I got from this is that we need to help the Democrats message better. they need our help. And the way that we do that is together. If the more that we can collaborate and partner, and the more voices we can get together saying the simple message over and over again. What's happening? And Nick makes the comment here that it was 3-1 just on impressions, but they had a much better message, right? So if I saw "Stop the Steal," I kind of know what's happening. Something's going on there. And if I saw somebody post about something about a lie, who cares?
Now, I will say Arizona, when the audit started, all of the Arizona groups are now using Fraudit. Anytime they are posting about that audit in Arizona, it's an immediate response of "this is a Fraudit." And that is exactly the kind of thing that we need to do. Call it out for what it is, something short that anybody can remember.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we're going to show you one of the ways that DemCast is fighting back. And I'm going to drop this link into the chat so that you can practice it yourself or save it for later. I think I am. Chat. Yeah. All right. Let me switch over here. This is one of our social media toolkits. And when I go to Twitter, one of the categories will now be "Stop GOP Lies." So this is the first category you're landing on here. This is about For the People Act. These all tell you what the People Act does. But this one right here, every post that you put here and you share from here, you are directly combating one of the lies that the GOP is telling about For the People Act. So we saw that on one of the trolls saying that they're going to let all the illegal aliens vote, right? So that would be an item of disinformation, and we'll debunk that right here in one of our posts. Okay. Right.
So there's a question on, how do we message effectively against socialism? One thing that research has actually shown is that Republicans are also very nostalgic. And so actually bringing back things that Republicans agree with that were labeled socialist at the time is a great way to combat.
Here it says, why use GOP? We probably could have put GQP. It's just a matter of saving characters. Because this isn't going out. This is the message going out. And so somebody was asking how you use this. You click customize and share. It opens up in your Twitter, or what if you've pressed on Facebook, it'll open Facebook, and then you'll share right there. And then you just hit tweet, and then it's tweeted out. And that's how easy it is. All right. Okay, I think we've gotten some questions. All right. Jamie's going to talk to you a little bit more about how to fact check.
Yeah. Do we have any questions before we move on, or?
I don't understand it's because we're fact checking. So we're turning it from fake to fact. We're sharing the facts. We're not going to share the disinformation. Julie, when you click on the build your own post, it takes you to a place where you can build the text and the pictures together. All right.
Yeah, nostalgia really does respond well with Republicans. And that's again a reason you saw Trump, make America great again. Michelle, we'll send out the slides for everybody. We'll make sure that Robin has it to send it out. And so Republicans don't like change. They want to go back to a time that was. But, using things like, when Social Security was introduced, that was called socialism. Or pointing out that, socialism, compare it to a country like Switzerland. So. Yeah, exactly. Libraries are socialists. So.
It was Medicare.
Yeah.
So are roads and bridges.
So are police.
All right.
So we're going to move on to fact checking. So when you want to counter disinformation, you really need to identify what you're countering. Is it fact? Is it disinformation? Or is it misinformation? We all know this, that, Kellyanne Conway's use of alternative facts was actually disinformation. She said that with the intent of deceiving us that facts are just opinions and everyone can have a different opinion. She checked the truth just straight out the window the very first day. So how do you know if it's disinformation or not? Don't fall into the trap of assuming it's right or wrong just because you agree with it. Do your own fact checking. Google is a great first step in determining if something is real. Search the name of an unfamiliar outlet or an organization. See what you can learn in that first page. Then also beware of sites that maybe are trying to look like they're the New York Times or the Washington Post. That was a thing for quite a while. Check out a trending hashtag. Who's using it? What's the tone of the posts? And then there are reputable, non-partisan fact-checking websites that you can use. And we'll make sure you guys get a list of all of this. You're talking about politicians, go to Open Secrets, find out who their donors are. And then realize even among reputable media, you have media bias. Not all media companies report the same way. Look at Fox, look at ONN. So it can be actually good to check out how other news outlets are reporting the same story. If you're fact checking, you might want to choose a source kind of in that top of this chart right here. And Ground News is actually a news service that shows how the left, right, and center are reporting on the same story. It will also show you if a news story is getting coverage on one side or the other. Again, the Matt Gaetz story, Fox News, right, is not really covering that. If you were listening to Fox, you would have really no idea other than that very first night. And then there will provide you a list of the different media biases checks that you can use as resources.
All right. Okay. So fact checking images, I want to go through this a little bit because this is more challenging sometimes to fact check because you're not the text isn't there. You can't check necessarily the source or who made it. Let's see. Images can be used to spread disinformation. For example, when the photo is doctored, or it actually represents a completely different event. We saw some of that coverage where people were talking about some of the protests, where it was actually like in a war-torn country from 4 years ago, and it's not downtown Minneapolis. But they're putting that image up and saying, this is what it's like, these are the peaceful protests. And so, we tend to believe what we see, right? We think it's real. But that's just not true anymore with the way that images can be manipulated. So,
and again, we saw the Trump campaign do that, adding more people to the rallies. You could literally pinpoint where they had copied the people in the audience and stuck them in.
Right. So, for example, Trump's team doctored this photo and it made his fingers longer. I wonder why he's so sensitive about that. They made his arm appear longer. They made his legs appear thinner. And the thing about it is that the White House, the White House has its own archive of pictures, and they're not doctored on there. So it was a really easy thing to check to see if the real photo had been changed. But it's not always that. So we're going to look at a reverse Google image search here. All right. We're going to talk about meme warfare. And when I needed some sort of meme that was, part of disinformation, I went no further than my own dad's Facebook page and pulled up his page and found all sorts of things I could fact check. So that's where we're going right now. We're going to my dad's Facebook page. And when I right click on this image, is that what y'all see, Jamie?
Yes.
Okay. I get options here, and one of my options is search Google for image. And that is because I am using Chrome. I'm not sure if Internet Edge or Explorer has the same thing. But because I'm using Chrome, I can actually have a shortcut and search Google for this image. So the disinformation here is Trump versus Biden's tax plans. All these taxes are going up, but you voted for Biden because Trump posted mean tweets. Wah, wah. Okay. So when I do that and search Google for the image, this is what I get. Well, here's Forbes. So I would probably trust what Forbes has to say about it. Smart Asset. I don't know who that is. Truth versus Fiction. That was one of the truth fact-checking websites. So I'm familiar with them. So I would go and see what they had to say about it. And this says it correctly describes and compares the Trump administration's tax plans, but there's a problem with it. It doesn't have the right context. This thing got 2 million shares in 2 months. So what is the problem? If I go on down here and find that out, and there's a lot of context here, but at the bottom, what I see is that this applied to people making more than $400,000 a year, mostly to people making $1 million a year, or corporations, large corporations. So when I go back to the presentation here, you'll see that this was what I got out of this. Editorials opposing the increases explained that wealthy individuals would no longer get their tax benefits. When? So this applied to people, to large corporations and six-figure earners. Nothing for people making under $400,000 a year. So this meme makes it look like we're all going to pay much more in taxes. And the truth is, the vast majority of Americans wouldn't be. And the ones that would be needed to pay their damn taxes. So that's not nearly as concise as this cute little meme, though, is it? This is a whole lot of information, and that's so we're going to talk now about how do we fight this kind of thing, right? Now that we found it, now we know how to verify it. How do we fight it? Unless there's questions so far. Any questions? All right. Oops.
Okay, so the first and most important rule of fighting disinformation, do not repeat it. Why can't we repeat it? Well, because repeating that information causes the, I don't like this word, Lori.
Illusory.
Thank you. Here's a fact to come into play. This is the tendency to believe false information to be correct after repeated exposure. When the truthfulness of information is assessed, people rely on whether that information is in line with their understanding or if it feels familiar. The first condition is logical, as people compare new information with what they already know, but repetition makes statements easier to process relative to new unrepeated statements. And that leads people to believe the repeated conclusion is more truthful. That means the more that we repeat disinformation, even to rebut it, it increases the likelihood that more people will believe it. So don't repeat it, don't share it, don't quote tweet it, don't comment directly. The algorithms on social media will actually respond by showing that to more people and letting more people see the wrong information. Rule number 2, sometimes the best response is to not respond. If you see disinformation on one post, but you don't see it being repeated anywhere, sometimes the best response is to do nothing at all. Trolls can use a tactic called bait, point, shriek, responding with disinformation just to get a rise in a response and take you off your message. Here's an example of how Daily Cost writer David Newert writing about how the Republicans have normalized insurrection, pretty much guaranteeing that will happen again. Trolls respond with disinformation using the what about to equate the Black Lives Matter protesters with the armed insurrectionists. No response to them is needed. Report, block, move on. And, when you are seeing, maybe disinformation on your candidate's post, you see a troll on there saying something false about one of the candidates from Virginia, the best thing to do is ignore that and then put out a factual post on there instead. And then encourage people in your group to go and respond to it. So that comment is up high in the algorithms.
We're going to talk a little bit about that here too. So how can we combat it if we can't talk about it? So one thing we need to do is concentrate on the facts and the narratives that are the truth. We need to amplify the truth tellers. Who's sharing the right information? One thing we can do, which seems a little counterintuitive, but use trusted messengers on the other side who are rebutting the disinformation. So for example, the Michigan Republican audit came out on the Michigan vote and said there was no fraud in the Michigan vote. None. Zero. We audited it. There's nothing. And if I was going to talk about it, I would use that message, not someone on the Democratic side, right? Especially if I'm talking to people who are right-leaning. Corrected information should be presented in ways that consider how and why the false story seemed credible. So explain why would you believe this? Well, why might I believe that? Remember this, playing to their biases. Expose the people behind the disinformation. So who's lying about this and why would they be lying about it? Change the story and use positive messaging that shows the other side. And like Jamie said, if you see disinformation on social media, don't respond to it. Instead, post the correct information from a trusted source. Now, let's take the example of my dad who posted the tax meme thing. Okay. So instead of me commenting on his post and saying, no, this isn't right, blah, 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 I could post something about, isn't it great how the Biden tax plan is only going to impact people making six figures and wealthy corporations. And here's the neutral site that I got this from. It's not from CNN or MSNBC. I got it from Reuters or AP or, something like that, or a local news story. And then I could tag my dad in the comment on Facebook and say, hey, Dad, did you see this? Isn't this great? That gives him the opportunity to be educated without being trolled by his own daughter, which I will admit to doing on occasion. But that was before I knew better. If on Twitter you're being trolled with disinformation, so let's say I posted something about taxes and somebody responded with that meme, I'm not going to respond to that meme. Instead, what I would do is respond to myself and say, for those of you saying that taxes will actually go up under Trump or under Biden, this is the truth of it. And then I would cite that source. Okay. And if the person on Twitter was spreading disinformation, then I would report that. All right. So principles of counter messaging. So the first thing when you're developing your counter message is you always want to avoid arguments and confrontation. You're probably just going to make them dig in deeper to that belief, right? Because then it becomes very, it's black or white. I'm right, you're wrong. Okay. So maybe acknowledge the shared concerns and common truth. I think we're all worried about taxes are going to go up, right? I could say that. Start with empathy. Instead of questioning sharing the disinformation, you can question their source. So instead of me calling out my dad and saying, you shouldn't have posted this, I could actually call out, it had a post about who posted that originally. I could say, that's interesting. This organization does a lot that's not truthful. And then always return back to the truth. Share trusted information from local sources.
Yeah, we've got a question of, does reporting disinformation get the post removed, or does it just put the disclaimer under the post? So it depends on what platform.
It depends on the platform and the circumstances. For example, one of the things that Twitter did was it would mark it would leave posts up, but mark them as disinformation, which in analysis actually did not change the impact. It did not change. They didn't take it out of the algorithm, which is that would have made the impact. Instead they left it up where people could see it, but marked it as potentially misleading. People didn't pay attention to that.
And that was only on COVID and the elections.
Right.
That is no longer an option on Twitter.
Mm-hmm. So the best thing to do is to block that person from being able to interact with you. Report it to Twitter. If you're on Twitter a lot, then there are groups that actually seek out bad actors. And several of these groups, and these people report, do mass reporting of people who are doing this.
And Facebook, you can report it on Facebook. They will, again, just put that little notice. None of what they do, though, prevents people from sharing that disinformation. They will only see that that it could be disinformation. So now we want to craft our counter message. We want to lead with shared values. Freedom, vote, your voice, inclusiveness, choice. You want to make sure that you, especially in Virginia, that you're positioning voters as the solution. By acting together, we can move forward as a country, as a state, rather than how, the Republicans want to move us back. Focus on the creation of good rather than stopping harm. Highlight the tangible positive outcomes. Again, especially in Virginia, we flipped the House, we flipped our state legislatures in 2020, and we have passed the Equal Rights Amendment. We have expanded voting rights, all the great stuff. Yes, Democrats deliver all the great stuff the Democrats have done in the last 2 years. And you can also highlight the fact, and you know what? Yes, you still have your guns. Crazy. For Democrats have been in control for 2 years, you still have your guns. And avoid the opposition's framework, language, hashtags, etc. Republicans are pushing election integrity, election security. Instead, you can flip that around and say, Democrats want, safe, fair, and accessible elections.
And they love freedom. Don't forget freedom.
Yes.
So anytime we can throw freedom at them, that's language that they have a hard time turning away from. Yeah.
And, the other thing we've been doing here locally is, really emphasizing, especially on voting, the fact that 4 times the Constitution mentions voting, that the right to vote shall not be abridged or denied, and that Congress has the power to enforce those laws.
Funny how that works.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's put this in some action here. So, again, going for some disinformation, I had to look no further than my own senator, Bill Haggerty from Tennessee. And this is his actual Facebook post. I wrote it out here again so it'd be easier to read. So his post is: Americans want common sense laws that make it easier to vote and harder to cheat. Such laws currently exist throughout the country. That's why we had record-breaking voter participation in 2020, including in my state of Tennessee. Democrats for the Politicians Act is as unnecessary as it is misguided and dangerous. It is a politician protection measure that would do irreparable damage to the fabric of our country, which is why I spoke on the Senate floor this evening and encouraged my colleagues to soundly reject this power grab. You hear all those fighting words there, right?
And again, bringing the fear back into it.
So let's look at the disinformation. Harder to cheat. Well, harder to cheat. It's already hard to cheat. It's almost impossible to cheat on any way that could actually change the outcome of an election. So this is based on the lie that there was somehow massive voter fraud and that we need to make elections secure. But that's not true.
And the fact that all the voter fraud that has happened in the last 2 years has been actually done by Republicans.
Right. Then he makes this claim that Tennessee had record-breaking participation. That is true. 68% turnout, which is crazy amount for Tennessee. But the reason that happened was they allowed no excuse absentee voting for the first time ever, and they had expanded early voting. Things that they're not going to do again, and passed laws to prevent from being put into place again. Unnecessary as it is misguided and dangerous. Well, it's obviously necessary because states have enacted at least 20 new laws making it harder to vote, especially for minorities. And interestingly enough, mail-in voting has been used a long time across the country. They have mail-in voting in Utah. In Oregon, where Nick is, it's all mail-in voting, okay? But guess who used mail-in voting for the first time in numbers last year? Minorities. So it was okay as long as it was just white people voting by mail. But since it's Black and brown people voting for mail, we have to do something about this. And in fact, in November, Lindsey Graham said that the Senate Republicans would conduct oversight of mail-in balloting because, this is a direct quote, if we don't do something about voting by mail, we're going to lose the ability to elect a Republican in this country. Flat out saying, if we let more people vote, they're going to lose. And so they know that. Unnecessary and dangerous. How is it dangerous? Where's the danger here? I asked Jamie, I'm like, I'm struggling to see where the danger here. And it's only dangerous to the Republicans in power. That's where the danger is.
Well, and again, it goes back to the Republicans feeding the base of their, because Republicans base off fear. I had a Republican roommate for years, and she was afraid of everything. And it was just fascinating in a morbid way to watch because fear literally dominated her life, even though nothing had happened to her personally.
So irreparable damage to the fabric of our country. I believe that translates into more minorities will vote, and they won't vote to keep us in power. And then reject the power grab. Well, what 2020 showed the GOP was that it was too easy for people of color to vote, and it was too hard to overturn elections. And that they know that more Republicans will lose if gerrymandering and racist restrictions are removed. So that's breaking down everything that's wrong with this post here, okay? And Jamie's going to help figure out what our message should be.
So do we have any questions before we move on? I know we're throwing a lot of information.
Karen says, don't buy from anyone who's trying to sell you fear. It's a smart comment. All right.
Okay, so when we are doing the counter messaging, we want to lead with our values. No matter our race, party, zip code, we believe that for democracy to work for all of us, it must include all of us. Ask yourself, who's leading the attacks on freedom? certain politicians, Republicans, are taking away our freedom to vote, to speak about our beliefs, to have our votes counted by trusted experts. Ask yourself what their motivation is. You know, they want to divide us. They want to spread lies about our election so they can silence the voices. Then ask yourself, what's our goal? How should our leaders help deliver it? And this is where really the liberal base of hope is together we can ensure our freedom to have an equal say with leaders that deliver, you know, the care, the quality jobs, the healthy future that all of our families. But the biggest thing is repeat the truth, repeat it. When you're sick of it, repeat it some more, and then repeat it again, and then take one deep breath and repeat it again. It's repetition. Just keep saying it.
Absolutely. Okay. So I thought I would take a look at some disinformation in Virginia. Looked around at, you know, I thought, well, I'll look at the Republican candidate for governor. And, you know, he sounds pretty moderate on Twitter. When I look through some of his posts, celebrating Juneteenth and, you know, believing everybody should get to vote. And then I found this. So this is the news story. A Virginia teacher was put on leave after opposing new rights for trans students. And this story is, and maybe some of you are aware of it, is that there was a physical education teacher who came to a school board meeting, and they were having a meeting about recognizing a student's gender identity. And he got up and said that he would refuse to do that. He would not lie to his students because it goes against his religious beliefs. Well, the school put him on leave after he announced that. And Glenn here went on Fox News, and I put the source here down on at the bottom. He didn't do this in writing. He did this on a Fox interview. And so what he said was, well, what we're seeing right here now in Loudoun County is the liberal left waging a cultural war, and the victims are children. Now, who else thinks that the victims are children? QAnon, right? I thought that was interesting the way he pushed that. It's like a little teaser of, if you're a QAnon person, I'm with you. And who's standing up for them? Not the politicians, but parents and teachers. And who's going to stand up for teachers and parents now, where the school board isn't and politicians aren't? As governor, I will stand for excellence education. And then he just throws in critical race theory, which has nothing to do with trans rights. So he's just, you know, hey, there's a trending topic that's, you know, that we've made into a boogeyman. So I'm going to throw that in there. And I will stand up for teachers and parents against these kinds of cancel culture initiatives. I will tell you, as governor, I'll have his back. So thinking about the counter messaging here, what's our belief? We believe that all school kids have the right to be treated with dignity and respect. Glenn is supporting a public school teacher's discrimination against trans kids based on his claims that it goes against his religious beliefs. Free speech and religious freedom cannot be allowed to override federal laws against sex discrimination in public schools. And Title IX protects the rights of students at public schools. If he wants to have a religious freedom objection, he needs to go teach in a religious school that's not funded by public monies. We need to elect leaders who will follow the law and stand up for all our kids. Now, that's not in a social media soundbite. But once you develop sort of what the counter messaging is, then you can start to pull some of those pieces out to share on social media.
And when we're doing our messaging, we do that a lot. We start with something that's much bigger and then go, now, how can we take out these words to make them fit? But on Facebook or Instagram, you could post the whole thing.
Right. All right. That's actually the end of our presentation. Do we have any other questions that we can answer for you guys? It's pretty quick.
We can make this like Friday after chat, and people can go ahead and ask their questions if they want. Stair, do you want to open it up so people can ask questions?
Sure, it is. The security is such that you can unmute yourselves and jump right in.
And go ahead and put your hand up, Joyce. Joyce, you have your hand up, but you're still muted.
Oh, okay. So I just unmuted the response was good for the Yunkin thing, but they want us to focus on the culture wars because that's their thing, that's their appeal. Whereas it's like if we're talking about culture wars, we're not on our messaging. So I don't know.
They do want us to respond to everything because they want to drive the narrative. And so it's easy to get caught up on that, but sometimes we have to ignore them and focus on our messaging.
I think it's a balancing act, right? So we wanted to pretend that Stop the Steal wasn't going to be a thing because we know how elections are counted and we don't have to respond to that. But then look at what happened there. We got so overwhelmed with the messaging. So I think, sometimes, remember, rule number 2 is sometimes you don't respond. I think you have to balance that. Don't take it off your message, but maybe when I'm talking about my message about kids, maybe if I'm talking and supporting the Democratic governor's candidacy, I could say something like, I really like the fact that he stands up for all our kids. And your counter messaging without drag, I'm not going at Glenn with my counter messaging. I'm just thinking about if this comes up, how am I going to respond to that? Yeah. And how am I going to push out the things that, are being discussed on the other side?
Yeah, and you can do that with critical race theory as well, of, literally calling it out that this is a non-issue. It is not being taught in K through 12 right now. So instead of, the Republicans focusing their attention on things that matter, like COVID and vaccinations and, money for our education, they're focusing on something that is not even being taught in grade schools right now. That's how out of touch they are. And literally call out the fact that it is not taught in K through 12.
Robin, I wanted to say something. It didn't make it in the presentation, but last year when I was on doing disinformation, we talked about doing something called the truth sandwich, where we said the truth and then we said the part, some of the lie, and then we said the truth. We're not recommending that anymore because it's so pervasive when people see the disinformation. Patty wants to know how you deal with gaslighting and when they turn the truth upside down. I mean, the thing about that is when they're gaslighting you, they want your reaction. They want to drag you down that rabbit hole with them. Don't go. Don't go. All right.
And again, with, the socialism, the critical race theory, again, this is all leading out of fear. They want their base afraid. And so we need to counter that with hope. I'm not afraid to let my child, learn about the true history of this country, because I know they're going to be a better person. So lead with your hope. Again, lead with your values.
And I think it depends on who you're talking to.
Yeah.
If you're talking to primarily Democrats and you want to fire up Democrats, then our messages need to be one of hope and optimism. If you know you're talking to maybe independents or people who lean right, but maybe aren't full-blown, QAnon-based people, then talk about how these policies will help everybody be safe and secure.
Yeah, and again, you can bring that word freedom into it, because that is the one word that resonates across political spectrums. Teachers should have the freedom to teach their classroom based on the local needs of that school.
Lori, Rita has a question. How do we prioritize which of the several lies that we should respond to?
I think you should probably look at what's most damaging. And again, rule number 2 is if nobody else is talking about it, I don't know that you need to talk about it. It's kind of when it reaches a critical mass of people talking about it that you might need to look at how to respond to it. Jamie and I were talking about how to help candidates, and if you're supporting candidates, and that if you see on your candidate post that people are coming on and trolling the candidate, as a supporter, you can go and respond not to the troll, but to the candidate. And you can say, oh, if you want to know about, so-and-so's economic plan, well, here it is. And this is what we all stand for, is equal opportunity. And, so you're countering the message.
And when you see something like that, that is something really good to put in a Facebook group, or, a Twitter group and say, hey, can you guys help me out on this? Because when you're getting that engagement, that makes it the number one comment. And the troll is pushed down to the bottom.
Yep.
And that is literally something you can do in a matter of seconds. Even the original comment, you can go on and say, oh my God, I love this candidate. I'm so excited to vote for. That's literally all you have to do.
Right. Corey has a question about if our website has messaging about anti-abortion disinformation. It doesn't, but right now we are currently looking at adding a fighting disinformation page on our website that would have basically your social, responses to fighting common themes of disinformation from.
I believe Planned Parenthood did have some of that messaging on their website.
Alvina?
I had a fascinating exchange that ties right into what we were just talking about earlier, about a couple of hours ago on Facebook with a Facebook friend of mine. And he went on about the meeting in Loudon and the critical race theory and all this. And so I responded about the Youngkin ad that we've all been seeing on TV where, he's got this very slick, obviously a lovely ad, doesn't talk about an issue that's of any consequence to any Virginians whatsoever. But I said, the thing that I find most interesting is the note that he ends on. It's a new day in Virginia, and the future belongs to us, not them. And my question is, who is the us and who is the them? And I just think, and so this about 2 people down, one of these troll guys, whom I've never seen on this particular Friends thing before, all caps, all about critical race theory and going about Beijing and Biden and Obama and Derek Bell. The idea is to indoctrinate our children with racial hatred and Marxism, vote Republican. I guess that's their message in Virginia. But it's, to your point, I think that forget the caps and forget the anger, but who is the us and who is the them? And I think over time, we're going to see through exposure of the Youngkin messaging exactly who he thinks the us and the them is, even if he is just talking to Fox. Eventually it gets out because people like Brian Stelter tells us,
Well, and that's all the messaging. You look at like a Tucker Carlson,
Exactly,
you look at any of them, it's, oh, they're trying to cancel us.
Yes, exactly.
And in reality, it's the other way around, because they're trying to cancel our votes.
Right.
So, but if that troll got no traction on that, nobody was commenting, that's when you want to leave something like that alone.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody has said anything back to him, but it's so weird. And he's got this critical race theory collage that, somebody put it together, but it's just, it's so busy you can't even see what it's saying, but it's just such an overreaction and so off point, it's hard to be even dealing with it. But we must. Thank you.
John, here, I'm going to spotlight you, John.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to follow up a little bit on the issue of using the term GOP. Given the theory is that you shouldn't repeat the framing of the other side, every time anybody uses the term GOP, it's a little mini ad for the grand old party, which is obviously not grand and is not as old as the Democratic Party is. And it seems to me that unless you're mocking it, saying, groupies of Putin or something, that you should try as hard as you can to never, ever use the term GOP because it's an advertisement for the bad guys. And
I use GQP and everything.
Well, GQP, except depending on what font you use, it's hard to see the little slash and the Q. But, I just kind of put it out to the crowdsourcing here. Maybe we can come up with some great ways to avoid it. I know it's an easy abbreviation to use, many fewer characters than Republican Party, but maybe you can just say the right wingers or, something that's a little bit more derogatory rather than giving them a pat on the head every time you refer to them. So it's just a question for us all to ponder.
And most of our posts, we actually put out Republicans, and call it out Senate Republicans, House Republicans. We actually call them out by specifically what we're doing. So in all of our response to, Republicans voting against the For the People, we literally put that all Senate Republicans.
Cool.
And I also think that a lot of people don't even probably know what GOP stands for anymore. It's equal to Republicans. I don't even know that they even equate it with Grand Old Party. I'm not sure it's such a pat on the head anymore, but I love GQP myself, so I endorse.
Yeah. And then that. We do have a question from Julie up here as well. Julie, did you want to ask it or do you want me to read it?
Sure, I'll ask it. I think this has been a great session, and I'm wondering how some of the things that we've talked about might apply to our being more proactive. In other words, not simply responding to disinformation on our candidate sites or other sites, but perhaps being present on some of their sites, their Republican candidates. Now, in some ways that feels a little waste of time because if somebody's there, they're probably there because they're really Republican. But on the other hand, I've got a little bit of a feeling of wanting to be a little revenge on them, to troll them a little or have a few things to say to them. I don't know, is it a waste of time? And what do people think?
Well, but here's the thing is that anytime you're responding on their social media, if you're responding to them, you're increasing their algorithm. You're making their message more visible.
That's the point.
So, that's why we don't recommend, on Twitter, you can quote tweet people. But when you do that, again, it boosts that post up in the algorithm to be seen. So if you wanted to share something, you could take a screenshot of it, take the picture of it, and use that in your post or your tweet. So at least you're not amplifying their post to be seen more. People would only see your response to that, to that.
But I do think it's a good idea to be on their websites, to be on their social media feeds, to see what they're saying, because that also allows you the opportunity to do a counter post on, Youngkin's, you're the governor, right? This is what Youngkin stands for, not teaching our kids, history is against trans rights. And this is what, the Democrat stands for, and drawing that contrast.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for opposition research, and I'm not talking about like, you're a campaign hardcore researcher. I'm just talking about, hey, I want to draw a line between my candidate and the opposition. I'll go over here and look and see what they said. It didn't take me 5 minutes to find that quote from Terry.
Yeah, and I do like to respond a lot on Twitter, but I always respond with a news article, and if I can, I will do it from Fox, because the Fox Business usually has decent articles, and so I'll literally respond with a Fox. And because then my comment is bumped up, which is directly refuting with an actual link to an article.
The team that I work with works a lot with newspapers, and of course online with newspapers. And one of the things that we need to do more of, and we're encouraging people who work with us to do it, and would encourage you all, is to go into the letters to the editor or the editorials and respond there.
Or make your own.
Yeah, or do your own. What we do is creating our own, right? But you can also, the trouble with when you create your own is sometimes the editor won't put you in, right? Whereas if you're responding to someone else's op-ed or to a letter to the editor, or even another comment that somebody has made, you will go in probably. So that's a very fruitful, really juicy place to say some interesting things, and using your principles will be helpful in doing that. Thank you.
Awesome. And if you post your op-ed, we're more than happy to anytime. Your local newspaper won't. We will push it out on our website and at DemCastUSA.com and tweet it out for you.
We love you. Do we send it to you, Lori?
No, we'll put in a link for you guys. And then Dennis has a comment of, it's a better use of time to get in with infrequent voters, Dems, rather than change the mind of Republicans. I absolutely agree with that. That portion of the Republican base that believes the big lie, that is into the QAnon theories, it's a waste of our time and our breath to even try to change their minds. No, Lori, there's a form they need to fill out. Please ignore that.
Oh.
So, yeah, especially when you are dealing with, the young voters that you want to vote for the first time, the infrequent Dems, that hope and change message is the best one to go.
And really, it's got to be clear about what, it's not just a generic hope and change. It's how is this going to change your life? How is this impacting you? A good example of this is messaging around the filibuster. Most people don't know what the filibuster is. And if they do think they know, they don't, because they think it's still people standing up and talking forever. And that's not happened for years. Also, they don't care about the filibuster. They pay about paying their rent, putting food on the table, having a job. And so we have to frame, why we can't have nice things is because there's some arcane rule that needs to be changed so we can get things passed.
Yeah, or there's a loophole.
Right. Yeah.
So.
All right. Got another? Okay. So Jamie dropped in the link to submit content. Ignore my error. All right.
That's not her department, so.
Not my department. That's why I said don't send it to me. All right. Well, we will get these slides out, and they will be sent out to you guys.
And we'll do a recap of this one. We did a recap of Tuesday night, but I think what we'll do is we'll put the two together with all the slides so people will have recap of both of DemCast's wonderful sessions. Thank you so much, Lori and Jamie, for all this information. You've certainly got all of us thinking, and we're going to look forward to seeing you again as the Women's Summit continues.